My name is Christian Ucles. Welcome to another episode of Go Ahead, Tell Me. This week's episode, we're talking to Elida Castillo, Program Director of CHISPA, Texas, a League of Conservation Voters Education Fund project. Elida organizes for climate justice within the Latino community in Texas. Listeners can find out more about CHISPA, Texas by visiting their website, chispalcv.org.
Well, Alida, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. Wanted to get a chance to have you introduce yourself, what the work is that you're doing, how you got to be where you're at, working with CHISPA, Texas.
Hey, hola mi gente. I'm Elida Castillo, Tejana from Taft, Texas, which is in the coastal bend near Corpus Christi. Many of you know that's where Selena's from. This is Karankawa land. And I do work with CHISPA, Texas, and it's a new program that we are establishing here, just to kind of help build like the grassroots movement, kind of laid down the foundation for our Latino community to get involved in, civically, with the environmental issues that we have going on here, and just, have a voice when it comes to like the decision-making process. And so these are like all initiatives that are very dear to my heart. And, I hope that we can engage, current community members and establish, a foundation for future community members who can probably go on to be leaders in the community and run for different offices. So that is like our long goal. But just right now, it's just establishing ourselves in the community. And so as a community member of Taft, which is a small town of less than 3,500 people in Texas, very rural, it's important to be engaged in what the issues are, especially when it comes to the environmental issues happening around us. I lost my mom to congestive heart failure, and my dad, had problems with diabetes. He was on dialysis for about 11 years. He used to work in an aluminum facility, and he also ended up passing of Agent Orange, that he contracted when, the effects when he was a soldier in Vietnam. So, things that we are exposed to when we're young can impact us when we're older. And it's very important for our community to know, what the industries, especially the fossil fuel petrochemical industries that are around our area, like what they're exposing us to. So that is something that we want to help, educate our community on. And hopefully in the future get involved politically. But right now it's just like on the issues of things that are happening around us.
Alida, that's such a connection, such a deep connection, such a close connection to you with what's happening with your family. This is the question that really comes to mind then, wanting to know why should the Latino community be involved in the environmental fight that you see, the climate change debate? What are some of the issues that are affecting our communities directly as to why they should be involved in that fight, in that social fight?
I think if you look at where a lot of these industries build, especially industries that affect our environment, they're built in predominantly, Latino, Black, Brown communities. And it's because they take advantage of the fact that they don't have to necessarily engage the community or inform them of what their rights are, of the permitting process, of, how they're going to negatively impact the community. We've seen it where they go into our communities, they throw around money to different organizations and to our political leaders. They'll make like contributions, or they'll say, we're going to invest this much in the community, or we're going to build a park, or we're going to have coastal cleanup. And, to curry the favor of community members, or they'll, donate money to the food bank. And they're not letting us know like what exactly they're exposing us to, or how they're going to impact us, be it taking our water supply, or, poisoning our air, or our soil, or also just impacting not just our current generation but future generations, and also just our pocketbooks directly, not just because they affect our health, but also our property taxes. They get deals where they have like subsidies and abatements. And so if they're not paying into the system, that money has to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, it comes from us, either if you're a homeowner or a renter. Your what you pay ends up, it increases. And so, there's just a lot of problems, that come uh, that affect our community. And I think like people are just way too involved in their daily lives, in their work, and they take advantage of that situation. So we got to see how it impacts not just us here locally, but our Latino brothers and sisters in South America, or Haitian brothers and sisters, or family, like relatives in the global South. We're all impacted by this in the end, through increased gas prices and things of that nature, too. So it's really important because they take advantage of the fact that they're not letting us know how they're going to negatively come and harm our communities.
Do you have any examples, at least in places like Texas, where you've seen, these organizations, these companies, corporations come in and promise jobs and an opportunity for people, only to see folks in the long run be affected negatively, either through their health or their surroundings have changed and not for the better?
Yeah, Texas is a prime example of it because of our lax regulations here. So we see it in communities like in the Permian Basin, or where Eagle Ford Shell is being fracked, where they're poisoning groundwater and air in those areas. And there's studies also done in communities that are exposed to high levels of air pollution. COVID has impacted them tremendously. And so there's a correlation between the quality of our air and COVID numbers. And also, when you have these fossil fuel corporations or petrochemical corporations coming in and saying, we're going to build this, facility, and we're going to employ, this many people, a lot of times the people that they employ aren't local, because they come back and say, well, you don't have the skills. So we need to bring in people from all over because they have the skills. And they say that we're going to create this many jobs, and they sell it on a higher number, but then the permanent number of jobs that they keep is significantly less, although they're getting tax benefits based on the higher number. And, we've seen it with ExxonMobil SABIC, which is what they like to call Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, which is a partnership between ExxonMobil and SABIC, which is a Saudi Arabian corporation owned by the Saudi royal, family. And each of those entities are receiving a tax subsidy or tax abatement. And they employed about 6,000 people. I'm going with what they said that they were going to employ during the build out. But now that number's dropped to about 400 to 500 permanent employees. And they like to say, well, we're paying them this, X number of salary. But they also don't say, well, really that salary is based on the amount of overtime hours that, these employees have to work. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and the Houston Chronicle did a great article on these, what we call them in Texas, 313 tax code. Like, it's a chapter in the Texas government code that allows these corporations to receive all these tax subsidies and benefits, because they say that we're creating jobs in the community. And what they benefit from doesn't actually benefit the community in the end. So there's a lot of information out there. But yeah, the Permian Basin, issues with ExxonMobil SABIC. Here we have Cheniere, we have Moda Midstream, which was purchased by Enbridge, which is the Canadian corporation that's trying to build or has built Line 3 up in Minnesota. So there's just there's a lot of examples of these corporations coming into the communities and taking advantage of the situation here.
We're listening to Elida Castillo from the League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, CHISPA, Texas. CHISPA has also has several different chapters around the country, not just in Texas, but also Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, and Nevada. The organization is really focusing on doing this outreach to the Latino community, not just because of the status, the political status that they hold in many of these states, but also the involvement of young people. And young people have been driving this climate change and environment debate for a long time. I mean, I remember as a child, myself in the 90s, being in an elementary school and having an environmental club. The and that was an eye opener. How is what is LCV doing? What is CHISPA doing to reach out to young people to really get them activated, not to just be angry, not to just do videos on Instagram or TikTok or tweet or Facebook about the environment, but what actionable items do you have? Are you going to be working on, or that LCV and CHISPA has done in some of these states?
Yeah, good question. So in Texas, we are going to officially launch the program in March. And we're going to start by surveying the community. That includes, community members of all ages, especially targeting our younger demographic, because a lot of times they're being used as the reason why we need a lot of these industries in our communities. They're saying, well, we need to provide jobs for our young people so that they don't leave the area. But, young people don't want to work in these jobs that exposes them to the dangers of, they don't know what chemicals they're going to be working with. They don't know if there's going to be an explosion. They don't know if they're going to, suffer the effects of like a burn or something. Like my dad, when he was working at Sherwin Reynolds Aluminum Company, he got massive burns back in the 80s. And, my cousin Lori, she was a secretary or, during at BP in Texas City back in 2005. And there was an explosion and she unfortunately, died in that explosion. So a lot of times they're trying to convince the community that they're doing this for the young people. They're doing this to create jobs for them. And, forget about the environment, forget about the harms, or, how they're going to be really stuck with the bill for these corporations who they could just file a bankruptcy and leave the community. And we're left holding, the check, the bill like for it. So what we're doing is we want to find out like what's important to them. And it doesn't always have to be like an environmental issue. It could be an issue with like, the lack of good paying jobs. And, something that we have seen is that clean energy jobs create 4 to 1, for every fossil fuel job that's created, clean energy provides 4. Because a lot of times fossil fuel companies are moving towards automation. And so we already have like a skilled workforce who know what it's like to work out in the fields or, out on these platforms, and they can transition to clean energy jobs. We also want to find out, like, do they have health insurance, or how are their student loans, and, advocate on those issues too. Because they go in and they go and get these jobs, they go to college, they get educated, they come out with these massive student loans, and then they can't find a job because employers are, sending these jobs overseas where they can pay somebody, to work for a salary that's significantly less than what they would have to pay here. So, there's just a lot of issues that we're organizing around. And, in our partner states, they're moving the electric school bus movement because it's our healthy, cleaner for healthy niños campaign. Because a lot of times they don't associate like the fumes that students are breathing in on their way to school to like long-term health effects. It could be asthma or, other other health concerns that get created along the way, because they're breathing in these fumes on a daily basis. And then that, of course, that's pollution, that gets emitted into the air. So there's just, a lot of initiatives that we're working on that we feel will impact our younger communities. And so we're also trying to push the Build Back Better Act, because that's also going to help create a lot of good jobs, a lot of good paying jobs for our community members.
Looking at a little bit more about CHISPA, there is a phrase that is used quite a bit, and it's about climate justice. You touched upon it a little bit earlier when explaining about it. Can you go a little bit deeper into explaining what climate justice entails?
Yeah, climate justice is the communities that are most affected having a voice in what gets built in their community. When I had said, like, a lot of times they're targeting lower income communities or communities of color. They take advantage of the fact that people aren't engaged. We found really it was a marketing presentation that was given to the shareholders of ExxonMobil when they were going to build ExxonMobil Sabic. And they said, well, we're going to build in San Patricio County because the community is basically not informed. There's not an environmental movement there. There's some environmental activity in Nueces County, and we got to be sure that that doesn't migrate over to San Patricio County. And so they take advantage of the fact that people have to, they're working more than 9 to 5. They don't work regular hours or, Monday through Friday hours. People are working several jobs, 2 to 3 jobs just to put food on the table. So they're not able to always, stay on top of these projects that are being built in their communities. And a lot of times, these projects don't even go and post the permits locally. They will say, oh, well, we met the conditions of the permit by placing the permit application in a library that's 2 towns over. So it's inaccessible. And so they take advantage of the fact that, these communities aren't aware of what their rights are. And so climate justice is bringing these folks to the table, having a seat at the table at the decision-making process so that they can say, no, we don't want these in our community. And we don't care how much money you're going to throw at these organizations, because in the long run, I'm being affected by it. You're building in my backyard, you're affecting my child's health, you're affecting my health, you're affecting my future grandchildren's health, you're affecting my future nieces and nephews' health. And we don't want that. And so that is something that we're, CHISPA, we're trying to work on getting more people involved in the process, because to be honest, even being in the environmental movement myself, I hear permits, they're like, oh, we need to respond now. And I'm like, I had my finger on the pulse, and these things get snuck through. So, and that's because I'm following the process. Imagínate, people who don't even have time to check in with family members every day. They follow what's on social media, and it's not always, that's another part. Media isn't keeping tabs on these facilities that are coming into our communities. So it's about amplifying that message, about elevating the voices of our community members on how these things are going to affect us in the long run, affect our health, affect our environment, and affect our pocketbooks. And so climate justice is having that seat at the table, because we deserve the rights that rich white people get to.
There's this article on the Washington Post regarding a study by the University of Minnesota titled +1. It talks about the environmental injustices, and it just really talks about how the majority of the pollution that's affected the United States has that it's basically a poor people and communities of color. And one of the aspects that it talks about in this study by the University of Minnesota professor. Sorry, I forgot Julian Marshall, the professor of environmental engineering at the University of Minnesota, talks about that. Talks about the aspects of even rural counties, not just urban areas that have a high concentration of people of color and folks from the uh, lower income bracket, but also rural counties are being affected. And this is a thing that I think a lot of folks, whether you're in California, in Florida, or New York, folks forget that people, Latinos, exist. African Americans exist in rural counties like San Patricio County. For example, I have family in Iowa, and a lot of folks in Sioux City, Iowa, Sioux County, Iowa, small counties with populations less than 100,000 people. And oftentimes these, like you said, folks are not involved in local government, and because they're just trying to work to put food on the table, and there isn't a venue for them to just ask, hey, why is that big giant a factory being built that's billowing out black smoke every day, and how is that affecting my health? It's great to hear that there's organizations like yours that you're doing this type of work to try to educate folks, because a lot of the time is if folks are not involved in local government, they don't know what's going on in their own neighborhoods. And you're always going to have someone who has money in their pockets that stand to benefit over other people. That sometimes when they invest in some of these things, these fossil fuels, it affects people negatively. Wanted to know here, we're going to wrap up here in just a moment, because I know you have a lot of work to do in trying to fight this stuff. It really what it comes down to here, as folks get to know more about CHISPA and LCV, and these are other organizations that are out there that are doing this type of environmental work, the aspect of climate migration, and you're seeing this in Latin America, and you're seeing folks that are leaving because of the effects of climate change. What are you seeing on the ground regarding some of the migrants that are coming to the United States or have been coming to the United States for the last decade or so, because maybe their farmland has been lost because of catastrophic storms or erosion or other things that are being affected by things that have correlations to climate change?
Yeah, well, here in Texas, I mean, our governor makes Governor Abbott. He makes a big deal about it, about it every day. And he uses, a lot of the migrants as scapegoats for his, own political benefit. But these, the migrants are just trying to survive because their lands are it's being affected by climate change. And a lot of times, these are American companies going over there and taking advantage, or not just American, but European companies and corporations taking advantage of these communities. We see it a lot in Argentina and Chile with Vaca Muerta. There's a lot of fracking going on there, and that's one of the largest, emitters of greenhouse gases, of methane, in the climate. And so people are being forced out of their homes because it's you either accept that we're going to be here and we're going to be ruining your lands. They're wiping out indigenous populations even now, and they're displacing them from their lands because it's well, your land has what we want, and we will buy your government off, with any means necessary, or we'll just take it because we want it. And so people are being put in the situation of it's either a fight or flight. And, they don't have the resources a lot of times to stay and fight. And they don't have the resources to rebuild after a massive hurricane or, flooding. And, we've seen it here, and we're a first world country. Last year, Texas suffered the effects of Winter Storm Uri, and a lot of people's homes were damaged, and they're still trying to repair it because the costs were so great. And so, imagínate, a country where people are earning several dollars a day and trying to rebuild and then fighting off naticals. And, it's a very sad situation. So we have seen it a lot here at our borders where people are escaping their countries because it's like, I have nowhere else to go. Like I either die from one issue or another issue. And it is a very, it's a worrisome effect because, at the end of the day, these are humans. These are our brothers and sisters, and they just want to survive, and they should have that right to life that, our government says everybody has a right to. And so one of our partners on the ground, Eddie Canales with the South Texas Human Rights Center, his organization goes out in Brooks County and the Valle, and they like set water bottles out for folks, like, these huge water tanks, so that when they're crossing over, they're able to drink something or give them that semblance of humanity. And for those who unfortunately don't make the journey, identify the bodies so that their families can be notified that their family member is no longer with us because they didn't survive the
the trek
journey.
is quite harrowing. When looking in the movement now, the climate change movement, the environmental movement, and just aspect of caring about just the nature in general, what are some of the things that individuals can do if they, if they're not able to go and volunteer, or can't go to a city council meeting to protest new factories being put up, or seeing a climate change assessment or a climate assessment on construction, stuff like that? What are things that individuals can do if they don't have the ability to participate on a daily basis? What are some of the things that they can do?
I mean, when they hear about a situation, share it with their friends. A lot of times their industry and our, even some of our political leaders like to say environmentalist, or, we're being alarmist, or we're exaggerating the situation. But, as you've mentioned, you were in an environmental group back when you were younger, and people have known about climate change since like the 70s or before that. And so we are now like not where we can like put this off for 10 years, 20 years. Like we need to take action now, because if we don't, we honestly will not have a planet. And, fossil fuel corporations, their goal is to make money for themselves and for their shareholders. They don't care about the communities because they don't live in these communities. If they cared about it, they would build a refinery in their backyard. But you don't see these going up in like the woodlands or, like the posh areas of Dallas and all that. They're being built in our backyards. So when you see something coming up, or if you get in a letter, or if you see something on Facebook, don't ignore it. Please like pay attention and share it, at least at minimum, and también like we're trying to bring it down to people's levels, because a lot of times they feel like, oh, well, I don't know enough about it. That's too intellectual for me. Or, I feel like I just don't know enough. Let us know too, like if that's something that you want to learn more about, like how we can, what resonates with you, like how can we speak to you? Because I will admit, a lot of times the environmental movement is very, intellectual. It's very academic. The terms that they speak in, and then it's not, in the language that's accessible to folks. It's not bilingual, or it's not, translated, or, in ways that people can understand. So don't hesitate to get involved when you can. Like even if it's sharing a post, or if you feel like, well, I want to help, but I don't know how to get involved, share your talents. Even if it's like, baking a dish, or for volunteers who are working to try to reach community members, or going door to door, like don't close the door on us. Of course there's a matter of safety, we understand that, but read the materials that's being placed on your doorstep. because a lot of times, like, we're not exaggerating what's happening in our communities. We really want people to be involved, because if not, this is going to continue where they take advantage and exploit our communities, because they're saying, well, they don't care anyway, because why aren't they at these meetings? And not
Yeah.
recognizing the fact that they just don't have time.
Yeah, and what I was going to say here is that for folks who are interested in finding out more about CHISPA and the League of Conservation Voters. League of Conservation Voters, for many folks already are familiar. They're they have chapters in just about all 50 states. But for CHISPA itself, again, the states are in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Nevada, Texas, where CHISPA has chapters. You can go to chispalcv.org, chispalcv.org, and then on the upper right-hand corner of the website, you'll see a button for access to the Spanish website. Wanted to ask here the last question, and then afterwards you can just, if there's anything else you'd like to say or talk about with us. March is Women's Month. It is just looking at the contributions that women have given to, well, us, not only in the world, but the advances that we've seen, that we've seen over the last 50 years. A lot of countries are seeing many other activists, especially on issues like climate change. I'm looking at Honduras with Berta Cáceres. Women are rising up and really saying that this is enough regarding issues dealing with climate change. What is the level of excitement within the women's movement regarding the climate change, environmental and activism?
Well, there's a lot of strong women, that I've come into contact with, and I've also, view as role models. But, we're still struggling in the environmental movement to try to get that recognition, or places of leadership. So it's an ongoing struggle, because not only are you, fighting these massive multi-billion-dollar corporations on the ground, but you're also trying to find support, with a lot of the large NGOs. And a lot of times, it's like grassroots organizations, mothers who are just tired of it, like tired of seeing their children sick. There's a lot of single mothers in the movement. And, I think we need to recognize the contributions that women have made, it's not just because we give birth to the human population, but I think it's because it's that maternal instinct of they're gonna fight for a better future for their children, or for their neighbors, or for their family. And there's just a lot of sheroes that I've come into contact with, and that we're trying to amplify, because it's not you can't really affect change or make true transformational changes in your community if you don't hear or elevate the folks in the community who are actually trying to make that change. Unfortunately, we see it a lot of times where people come into communities and say, I know what's best for you. And so we really need to listen to the leaders in the community and who are saying, no, I know what's best for my community, because I live here. I don't just come in and, I could swoop out, just for me, personally, my roots are in my community. So after this call, or, after the workday is done, I can't just stop fighting, because I'm from here. I'm affected by this myself. So I think it's just recognizing the contributions that our women leaders have made, because they're fighting for their families, they're fighting for the future, and they're fighting for Madre Tierra.
Elida Castillo, a pride of South Texas. If we had the rights to Selena music, we would play you out to some Selena music, but
yeah, you don't want to deal with Selena's dad.
I don't want to deal with that. Yes, exactly. I appreciate you being on the show with us today. Again, for folks who are interested and getting involved. CHISPA Texas, you can access the website chispalcv.org. And if folks want to get a hold of you, Elida, how can they get a hold of you? How can they help and participate with the program? You said you have a launch in just a couple of days here in March. How can folks get a hold of, participate, and volunteer?
So we are working right now on our own CHISPA website, but we currently are on social media. We have a Twitter account at CHISPA Texas. We have Instagram, same handle, and we're also on Facebook. And, my Twitter handle is at Elida IC on Twitter. And, just we're out there, and follow us and share the content, especially if you have family in Texas, or even for some of our partners in other states, share it, because we really want to impact our Latino community and elevate the leaders and really make that change, especially for our future. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity. This is fun.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
All right,
Take
you
care.
too. Bye-bye.
That was Elida Castillo with CHISPA, a project of the League of Conservation Voters. They have chapters in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Nevada, and Texas. You can learn more about those chapters at chispalcv.org. We want to thank our listeners for joining this week's episode of Go Ahead Tell Me. Please follow Go Ahead Tell Me on social media, share far and wide, and you can listen to our episodes on Spotify or iHeartRadio. Again, I'm Christian Ucles. Have a great week. Let's talk soon.